Evening all, welcome back to Space Engineers. Right, we're continuing our build of the mighty Apocalypse here. And it's not going too well, because anywhere there's angledness, that's a reminder of what we're building. Yes, those are mining lasers. I think the observant among you probably would have noticed that. Let me explain that very quickly. Don't you thinking I'm some kind of Care Bear? Which, well, I guess I was. Way back in the annals of time, the Eve was you didn't have mining barges, you didn't have any bonuses for mining. You literally had to mine in a battleship because it was the only thing with 8 turrets. The only thing in the game was mining lasers as well, not the strip miners as you may be thinking, but this was literally the miner lasers, what they called them, mining lasers rather. That was it. That was all there was in the game. And mining was not, well, I guess it was quite prominent actually, because I mean, if you join me in a meander down memory lane, back in the day, there were no deep space stations. Okay, so if you imagine all of the deep space of Eve, there was nothing there. And I mean nothing there. No one even lived there. So you would fly out in a frigate to like wherever to find Arcanor, and then you'd mine that, and then you'd bring it back. You used to actually have Arcanor spawn in Amar. The actual system of Amar Arcanor used to spawn there. So, you know, go figure. But eventually they pushed it to deep space, and then people just used to go into deep space to mine. And then after a while, people started to sort of cotton on to the fact that people were coming back with frigates filled with a little bit of ore. And then they used to get ambushed, really. So, you know, from that point forward, that's why when battleships came in, all of a sudden you would mine in a battleship. So you'd refit your Apocalypse that you'd maybe use for a bit of PvP on the night before, if you even dared use it, that is. And you would then run it to mine, and then you'd mine and blah, 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 blah. So, you know, fascinating stuff, I'm sure you won't agree, because this was when, like, you know, Eve was, there were very few ships at the start of Eve, worth noting. So, as we continue to build our armoured prow beak front thing end, it's not going well. I'm having real difficulty with this. And Nano took over eventually, because I literally just was like, nope, can't do it. And then I thought I'll go and do the other part of the ship. But I think it's probably something that is really quite cool about the game, is the fact that you can just put your time into it and build really anything. You can build obviously massive stuff like we're building here, and hopefully you can see the scale of this. It's pretty vast, all the way through to building smaller stuff. You can build some pretty small fighters, but you can make fighters quite big, and you can make counter ships quite small, if that makes sense. And it really comes down to, I guess, what you're trying to achieve. And I think certainly for the Apocalypse here, really what we were trying to do, and the front isn't right, I know it's not right, but it's something. A lot of what I do when I build is get the blocks in and then take it away. It's a bit easy. It's like, I guess it's from my days working in a wood mill. It's easier to actually have the wood and take it away than it is to, like, when I worked in a metal shop, to then add metal to it and weld it back on and then grind it away. It's always easier that way around. And to be honest, that was certainly the easy way to do it. So I started to then work on the front prongs as well. And this is then something just a bit easier, all by eye. Just literally, you just work out what makes sense from eye. And you can, where you make mistakes, just then recover that, as you see there. Very, very, very therapeutic, I must say. I think there's something quite relaxing, certainly, about making something this big. Now, I think the game is designed to make stuff this big, but maybe only for stations. The fact that I'm trying to make a ship this big is probably what may cause me a few problems. And I think certainly when we come to put engines and power and etc. on this, it's going to be tricky. But what I'm more interested in is the internals. I really am quite keen to see if we're going to be able to build the inside of this thing to be of note. I think that's going to be quite cool. But again, that draws an interesting conversation, because in theory, all ships in Eve for capsuleers are unmanned. Now, I know this has always been a very long debate, because if you look at the lore of Eve, it suggests that the pod takes over a lot of the functions of the ship, but there are still human crew aboard. But when you look at the game mechanics, there's nothing really in there that suggests there is a crew. Like, you don't pay them, there's no wages or something like that. So I think this has always been a big debate, because I think the reality is that the lore suggested that there would be some form of crew on board every ship, I think, just to make the ships feel bigger. because having something this big just controlled by one pod makes no sense. Well, I guess it does, but it's less interesting. It's nice to think that you've got 100 battleships and crew dying, fighting whatever, than it is to think that this is just 100 pieces of metal and a load of immortal clones. Do you know what I mean? The difference is quite pronounced, I would think. But who knows? I think the reality is that with this particular build, I'm probably going to base it on the fact that firstly, I'll do the first vid assuming that there's just a pod. So there'll literally be an empty shell with a few reactors and then a great big space for a pod, and with a big sign saying this, insert pod here, which isn't ideal, I know, but that's kind of the way I think it is, in my mind anyway. But I think certainly what we're going to do is I think look again at the whether or not we can put a big. I mean, imagine fitting this out. You could have probably up to 20 decks, maybe about 20 decks. There's about 40 blocks high, a block for the floor. Then that could be in areas there could be literally 20 whole decks. From top to bottom. That'd be pretty sweet, maybe more in fact, but hey, I'm really excited about that. In fact, I think it's more than 20. I'm looking at that. I think it could even be 40. Either way, we'll give it a go. The reality is that it may completely break the game if we do, but if we do, so be it. I'm really quite curious to see what this game can actually handle as well, because I think a lot of the time when you run these games, they probably are designed to build what we built before, like that flagship, something the size of that. And I think, like with Minecraft, I guarantee you that Notch and team never built anything like people have built since. These huge sprawling castles and worlds and lands. Somebody I saw actually had recently just done all of the Westeros. All of Westeros literally in Minecraft. I mean, that's impressive. All of King's Landing all the way up to the north. Incredibly, absolutely just mind-blowing stuff. But even then, it's all the way up to things like somebody had created the Starship Enterprise in Minecraft as well. So it's exciting stuff. I'm quite keen to see that sort of stuff. So I think really this was a bit of a test to see whether or not we could build the ships. But there we go. That's looking about right. It's coming. Can you see it? Can you see it yet? Can you tell what it is yet? It's getting there. And I think, as we go through this, you'll start to see it get a bit more so. But it's running fine. The zone still we're getting about 30 frames a second, even with fraps running, so that's pretty good. Looking again at my schematics to my left, and then what I'm starting to do here, this is interesting, is I'm marking out where I'm going to cut from the ship, because you're working so close to this huge massive object, you don't have the ability to literally stand back that easily. So you do need to literally fly all the way back as you're doing here and say, okay, bit more. No, that's about right. So then you can carry on marking where I'm going to cut. And then we're going to cut this hull out, and that then becomes part of the dipped, the two inverse camel humps, if you like, on the underneath of the Apocalypse, which I think always quite intrigued me with their design. So that's one. Now we need to judge how this middle section will be as well, because this middle piece is going to be quite a challenging one. So I reckon about there, maybe a bit more. Yeah, about there. It's about 30, 40 blocks, something like that. Oh no, it's probably more. It's about 60, I think. Let's have a look. I remember it being around 60. Yeah, there we go. So we know that from our tape measure that we need to do about 60 blocks from that one there. So there we go. So again, could be more scientific, I know, but that's pretty interesting to have to do that in a game, isn't it? I think that's pretty cool. Now, we just need to be careful as we cut these panels out, because again, this isn't Minecraft, so there is gravity, and gravity affects blocks, and or rather, the connection state also affects blocks, which is more important, because if you cut away, if I literally just take a laser beam to the sides of that ship now, those panels detach from the ship and then float away and can actually cause damage. So a lot of this build, we're trying to be very, very careful with cutting away blocks. So if there's blocks left exposed as well, we try to remove them before we do anything with them. So it goes just slightly bigger, and I think it's deceptive at this point because that front bit isn't really showing the depths of what that'll turn to, but hey, it'll do. So let's start to cut. Scalpel, please. Oh, actually, yeah, it's a good point. Before we do that, you'll notice I'm bracing here all of the panels because, again, if I cut, like I say, 2 of them off and they're only connected by a diagonal, they will actually drift away, which then can be dangerous. So what I'm doing is just bracing throughout the hull all of the panels as we see them, just on either side of the incision. So, you know, almost a little bit weldering-like there, eh? So here we go, and then we're going to start. Oh no, I've done it wrong already. So we're going to start cutting away now, and basically what we're going to do is that, and that's almost there. Ching, there we go. Now that's not bad. And then let's do the second one. So that's about to there. Perfect. And that's it. And that's all we need to do. Now there is going to be lots of floating blocks and things like that, but we'll just take our time and we'll make sure we clean them up. Like, for example, you see the red ones have now broken away. Prime example of what I mean. They can be quite dangerous. So I need to, and you see I can only remove them without symmetry. So I need to make sure that I remove them individually. So, you know, be aware of that. But this is coming on quite well. And then we go. So let's just remove the marker lines. And there we go. And I would say that that's coming on good. Now, in terms of, I think, certainly, I guess the way that CCP design their ships, it's always quite interesting. In fact, it's very interesting because they do it in a very kind of odd way. There's very little symmetry in any Eve ship, in fact. In fact, it's even odd to think that there is symmetry coming through. This comes from, I think, 1 or 2 of their kind of initial designers that worked on the game at the very start. I think they had a real, you know, love for non-symmetry ships. That's pretty evident because a lot of the ships way back, you know, pretty much only until recently with things like when the capital ships came in, started to really be symmetrical. So even stuff like, you know, the Megathron, which is like a Galante battleship, that in theory should be symmetrical, but it's not. It's got a great big jet turbine on the side. And so on. To be honest, I think that there was a nice charm to it. I'm kind of, you know, I did like it. It did make a lot of sense to have that. So here we go, just going to brace the central bit, and then there we go, look at that, starting to cut away the scaffold. It's coming on nice. Now that's our first cut done. Now we need to do the second cut. Now, I mean, again, this was time consuming, and I have sped this up. I don't know if that's very evident or not, but certainly this was something that was really, it took a lot of, you know, patience, because when you're doing mass cuts like this, you see you can get it wrong, and then you've got a problem. I have ruined quite a few builds by just not being careful and doing a big cut, and then like my Rifter was a prime example. I cut the one of the wings off it, the front nose wings, whatever you call it, and that was kind of unrecoverable without having to make the whole thing again. So I did learn massive amounts doing that Rifter. I mean, I can say probably that Rifter was certainly a great trial by fire, because it taught me the basics of what to be aware of. As you can see, this is now coming on nicely, so let's just make sure that we, you know, finish our final cut. There we go. And I think certainly once you master these tools of, you know, mass block, inclusion and deletion, then, you know, a lot of the game can be done quite quickly. And hopefully seeing how quickly we're building this. I mean, I know we have sped this footage up because we were being very meticulous, but the reality was it was only a couple of hours of work, really, you know, and it's you know, hopefully that's coming across. Certainly with what you see, because to be honest, a lot of it is just about going for it. It's like I say, it's better just to put the blocks in and then remove them than just to kind of fanny about not putting them in. So there we go, cut number 2 done, and that is certainly coming together a lot nicer now. So, you know, again, we need to fill this in, so we need to make sure that that makes sense, but we can start to remove some more of the scaffold, so we can, you know, basically start to have, I guess, just a bit more, you know, confidence this is coming together relatively well. Now, always leave your guidelines in for the bottom. As you can see, we put the guideline in here at the bottom, but always leave these in as long as you can, because the exact extents of the ship you probably do want to build in for, I guess, your records. So here we go. It's going to try and build a bit of a thing. Now we will smooth these edges eventually. Not right now, but I think right now this is a massive ship we're building. I mean, just a phenomenally big ship. And I think really what I was keen to do was to get it so that the basic hull is done. It would need a lot of dressing and setting up and beautifying effectively with things like the beacons, etc. But I think it needs, you need to get that point quite right. So as you see me looking again at my schematics as I turn my head to my left. I was just basically trying to figure out what these things were supposed to be doing. But as you can see, it's kind of getting there, and I think really a lot of it is, you can just be quite confident that if you're going to do, something complex, just go for it, and you can always, tidy it up later, which is certainly what we did with this particular one. A lot of it was just trying to get from a distance, does it look like an apocalypse, yes or no? And if the answer is no, then you just keep working on it until eventually you do. But there's certain things that also are very difficult to, I think, get right, and the curved pieces were very, very difficult indeed. And I think after a while, it was just getting very, very tough. But again, in terms of the blocks and so on, it's handling it quite well. So there we go. That's part 2 done. Join us in part 3.